Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about the discriminant. So if we look at our quadratic formula, the discriminant is what determines what kind of answer we have. It's going to be a rational answer. Is it going to be irrational? Is it going to be complex? So if we look at the quadratic formula, what part of it will determine what our answer will look like? The answer is everything that's underneath the radical. So the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. It's just this part of your quadratic formula. So if we think about it, it'll determine how many roots we have and what kind. So let's review. A root, also called an x-intercept, a solution, it's the answer to your quadratic when it's equal to 0, or any equation. So when would the quadratic have one root? Well, if the square root of this thing is 0, then we're going to have negative b plus or minus nothing. So negative b plus or minus nothing over 2a is just going to be negative b over 2a. So the only time you have one answer is whenever your discriminant is 0. So if d equals 0, you got one answer. Every other time, you're going to have two of them because it's be plus or minus something. Okay, now what type? Let's think for a second. What if b squared minus 4ac were a perfect square? Let's say 16. You'd have some number plus or minus the square root of 16. Well, square root of 16 is 4. It's an integer. So you can have an integer plus or minus an integer divided by an integer. You get rational answers. Now, that is, of course, we're assuming it's positive, it's a perfect square. Now, if it's not positive but not a perfect square, then, well, we're going to have square root of something, but it ain't going to be nice. And if it's not nice, it won't simplify all the way. Then we're going to have a square root in there. So that would be an irrational answer. If d is 0, so this part is 0, we're going to have negative b over 2a. Well, it's going to be an integer over an integer. Again, that's rational. Okay. Our last condition is if d is less than 0. Now you could, I guess, break it up into more conditions, but simply enough, if d is less than 0, that means it's a negative under the radical. It means we're going to have an I. We got something plus or minus some sort of I. We got a complex answer. It could be pure imaginary if b is 0, but all numbers are complex numbers. And if we have d less than 0, we have a guaranteed I. So we're just going to call all of those complex. Okay. So let's calculate the discriminant. So it is just that b squared minus 4ac. It helps you out. Write down what a, b, and c are. Make sure you're in standard form with a quadratic. It's got to equal 0. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. From there, you know, a is 2, b is 12, and c is negative 13. Make sure you watch your signs. Also watch your signs whenever you're plugging numbers into the formula. Regardless of the formula, whenever you're plugging in numbers, put your numbers in parentheses. Then type it in the calculator, just as you see it. All right, it's b squared minus 4ac. So I'll write that down so we can remember. Now, how about b squared minus 4ac. Again, that's just the part underneath the radical of the quadratic formula. My b is 12, so I'm going to put 12 in parentheses, squared, minus 4. My a is 2. Again, I'm just going to put it in parentheses. And then we have c is negative 13. Take your calculator, type it as you see it. squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 13. And that will give you 248. So D is 248. It asks, how many roots do we have and what kind are they? My head's in the way. They're in the number and type of roots. So how many do we have? Well, is that number 0? No, it's not. So we have 2. Now, what kind are they? It's positive, so it's not complex. It's either rational or irrational. I don't know. What's the square root of 248? My calculator does. It tells me it's not a nice square root, so it's not a perfect square because it still has a square root in there. So that would be an irrational answer. Okay, let's look at the next one. Again, we're in standard form, so that's good. A is just the coefficient of x squared. The x squared has absolutely nothing to do with what a is. It's just the number in front of it, so it's -1. Not -1 squared, or anything like that. It's just -1. B is 16. Again, the coefficient of x. And C is a -64. Now, you don't have to write it down every time if you're fluent. You can just skip straight to plugging it in. But please do write down what you're plugging in. And do write it with parentheses. And for me, this is all the work you need to show. I don't need you to show each of these calculations. Let's see. It's fine if you want to, or if you have a calculator that's not this one, you need to. If you're using your phone, yeah, do the 16 squared and then multiply this together, watching your sign, then combine them. But if you have the Casio FX115ES Plus, like I told you to, just type it in. And as you saw right there, I hit the negative sign at first. Make sure you put a minus here and not a negative. They are different symbols. The calculator needs to be able to tell what you're trying to say. You get that, you get -240. What did I miss? The square. Don't forget the square. And you get 0. So I got D is 0. I knew it should be 0 because that's 16 squared, which is 4 squared squared, and then I have 8 squared and a 4. Oh, 1 second. All right, guys, took a bit longer than expected, but I'm back. So we got D is 0. If we go back and look, what does that mean? D is 0, 1 rational root. So you haven't written this down yet, might want to go ahead and do that. So 1 rational, that's what kind of answer we have. Let's check out the next one. Notice it's not in standard form, so put it that way. Subtract a 10x from both sides, put it in the correct order, and now we're equal to 0. We're good to go. And hopefully, A, -4, B, -10, C, 84. Plug it in. Now, this one is where a lot of people were making some mistakes. It's -4 times A times C. So if you type this in the calculator, make absolute certain you put your -10 in parentheses. If you do not, you'll get completely and totally the wrong answer. I do this, I get 1,444. So that's D. Well, it's positive, so it's got two, either rational or irrational. Let's see what square root of that is 38. It's nice. So this is two rational. There we go, rational. Now, what a lot of people were doing was they're dropping those parentheses off. And if you don't put your parentheses, you're actually telling the calculator multiply -1 times 10 squared, which is not what we want. And you'll see you'll get an entirely different answer of 1244, which is not nice. So completely and totally change your answer. Make sure you put your parentheses when you're plugging in numbers. All right, another one. If we look here, A is 3, C is 24, and we have no B. What number is nothing? 0. So 0 squared minus 4AC. And if we do that, sorry. We get -288. So that means we have less than 0, so that's 2 complex answers. They're going to have some i's in there. It's going to be square root of a -288. So actually, this one will be pure imaginary since B is 0. If you plug it in the quadratic form, that's going to be plus or minus the square root of -288 over 6, 2 times 3. So actually a pure imaginary number, but we're just going to go with complex for anything that has a negative discriminant. All right, a few more, and then we're going to call it quits for this section. All right, so I'm just going to type it in the calculator. Let's see. B is 4, so 4 squared minus 4AC. And you get -28. And it's negative, so again, that means complex, and you got 2 of them. Make sure I didn't put 1 complex last time. All right. The next one, let's calculate our discriminant. B is -20 minus 4. A is 4. C is 25. You get a nice 0 there. It means we have 1 rational. B is -11. A is -3. C is 2. We get 145 for the discriminant. Now, if I try and take the square root of 145, it's not going to happen nicely. That is 2 irrational. Lastly, our A is 1/2, B is 0, C is -8. So I've got, you can type in 0 squared, obviously not going to make a difference there. Oops, minus 4. A is 1/2. And C is 8. We get 16, which you should know is the square of 4. 16, that's a perfect square, which means we have 2 rational. Now, it is the discriminant. So what's it discriminating against? Well, it can tell us how to solve our equations. Let's go back over the different ways we have solved our quadratics. First way we looked at was graphing, which sucks, don't do it ever. Second way, well, the second way we did it was with factoring, or the AC shortcut. But remember, those don't always work. They only work if it has nice answers. And guess what? Our nice answers are rational answers. So anytime we have a rational answer, so our discriminant is 0 or a perfect square that's positive, we can factor it. If it's irrational or complex, no factoring is going to, technically you could factor it, but it's not going to be obvious at all. You'll have to think about factors that involve square roots, so yeah, it's not happening. So irrational, complex, can't factor. What else could we do? We could complete the square, so we did a couple weeks back. Yeah, that's also, I don't like completing the square unless I absolutely have to, which is not for solving quadratics. Best way to solve a quadratic that will always work is your quadratic formula. So you could just shove all of these in the quadratic formula and be done with it. Or, you could factor these two and use the quadratic formula on those two. Since, you probably want to review factoring / the AC shortcut, let's do it that way for those that we can. First one, I cannot. It's got complex roots. That means I need to use a quadratic formula. Oh, hey, look. This is b squared minus 4ac, isn't it? That's what's going out of the square root. I can just do this. Negative b, so negative 4 plus or minus the square root. Hey, I just did all the work, so I'm going to write down what I got. Negative 28 over 2, and a is negative 1. So just put negative 2. So we do have a complex number, so we're going to go ahead and split it up. Negative 4 over 2 plus or minus. Simplify your square root whichever way you want to. And I'm just going to do a half. Actually, it's negative 2. Negative 1 actually matters. It's plus or minus, but whatever. Take the calculator, make sure you load 2. Square root of negative 28, and you'll get what? 2 square roots of 7. Yeah. So 2 square root 7. I make absolute certain your I is not underneath your radical, and this is not in your denominator. It can be in the numerator. In fact, you don't have to hit that 1. Let's not put the 1 there since we have a 2. And in fact, I'm just going to kind of move it over a little bit. There. You can consider that whole thing or just that piece, because we're going to simplify that in a second. Negative 4 over 2, that's negative 2. Negative times positive negative is negative positive, I guess. Whatever, doesn't make a difference. Because we have this negative right here, and then this plus or minus here. Could simplify that in a minute. It really doesn't matter. But 2 over 2 is 1, so it's just square root of 7i. So it's negative 2 plus square root of 7i. Negative 2 minus square root of 7i. And that is how we solve it using quadratic formula. That's our solutions. You could have typed this whole thing in here to check yourself. One of your answers, plus to the minus. That'll give you your other answer. So you got the -2. Oh, I dropped off my negative right here. When I check. That's going to make all of those positive. Sorry about that. And there we go. Next one has a rational root, so I'm going to use the AC shortcut. You could absolutely factor it. You know, it's kind of already a perfect square trinomial. You can probably see it. But if not, just use your AC shortcut. Factors of A times C. That combined to give us a B. A times C is 100. Positive and positive, and we need a -20. So that means both of my factors need to be negative. And however bad you suck at your multiplication facts, just go through the factors. You can do -1 and -100. Well, that's not it. -2, -50. I'm going to skip towards the middle. I know it's 4 times 25. So -4 and -25. That still doesn't work. No pause. Okay. Sorry. -5, -20. That's -29. That's -25. We're getting smaller. Oh, wait, I know. -10 and -10. That combines to give us a -20. So however long it takes you to find those, find them, and you're pretty much done. Remember, your roots are just x equals negative of your factors. Oh, hey, wait, it's the same thing, so I'm only going to write it once, over A. And simplify. Positive 5/2. We can check that using our calculator. Or -20, 5/2. Well, next is irrational quadratic formula. So that's going to be -11 plus or minus square root of 145. That doesn't simplify at all. Over -3 times 2 is -6. Split it. That's positive 11 over -6 is -11/6. And since that square root of 145 is not going to simplify, I'm just going to do plus square root of 145 over 6 and minus. Since I'm doing the plus or minus, that negative on the bottom is not going to change it. And you could do a minus here and it'll change that to a negative. The other one will be positive, whatever. As long as you got both of them, you're good to go. And this last one again is factorable, so we can use factoring or the AC shortcut. All right. So AC, that adds up to B. Let's find it out. 1/2 times a -8 is -4. B is 0. Well, it needs to be negative, so it's got to be positive and negative. How about 2 and 2? One of them being negative. There it is. So negative factors over A. If you divide by 1/2, you're actually multiplying by 2. Negative times negative is positive 4. And then you're also going to have the negative 4. Again, you can check it. Half, 0, -8, 4, -4. Moving on. Actually, we're done. That's the discriminant. It will tell you what kind of answer you're looking at. There is some practice. Just use the discriminant to determine what kind of solution you will have. That's the main thing on this. See you on the next one.